So there's your motivation right there.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Iran did those notes. Was it?
Baghdad was the head of Persia. After Istanbul, it moved over there. Yeah, they just transferred the notes over after Lawrence was unsuccessful in acquiring the notes when they broke it all up. But he was a secret agent. Yes?
Just going back to the syntax within contract and the law, if it is to change, like people like us, I suppose, if we were able to write it, and let's say most corporations out there now have got contracts and agreements, banking, house loans, everything, that are not valid. So if you were to rewrite it, is it as simple as being able to rewrite it, and then if they challenge you in court or take it to court, are you saying that you will win every time, 100% of the time, just by presenting that argument, or is it still subject to?
If you're going to rewrite it, both companies or both countries involved with going to syntax would be in agreement. Right now, we have agents here in Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, Dubai, the United States. All over the world, we are coordinating. 2 countries that now have syntax quantum, 115-page quantumized bank treaties, and they are communicating and studying to get their people and the machinery set up for all this. When the time comes, everybody's values will stay the same. The contracts will be correct. You will not notice any difference. There will not be any big announcements to scare anybody. You never scare anybody. You fix it.
Yeah.
As long as everybody fixes it at the same time, there's no place to run unless you want to go sit on a space shuttle someplace. But otherwise, we're all on this spaceship Earth. We're all part of it. We got to work together, and everybody will be happy to fix it. This program and the things that I've said on this thing have already been broadcasted all over the world for 10 years. And so it's no secret. People know about it. They don't talk about it, but they all know about it, and they're all waiting for it to happen. So nobody's afraid. They just know it takes time to study. I mean, everyone that's been in the program has spent years studying, and they know that it's just a mountain of information to do it. I got a 30-year jump on everybody else. That's why I teach it. And they respect the fact that I'm willing to come out here and teach it to everybody. And then make tapes so that we can spread it all over the planet.
But how will that affect them? Like it's 1 or 2 or 3 people?
They're still going to be in charge because they know they have friends. The guy up here has 100 contacts. You don't know who the 100 contacts are. You can't step in there and talk to these people. They all trust each other. And they all have rules and regulations of cooperation. And there's this thing is like a big pyramid. That they got people at the top who talk to people at the bottom. It's corporate. They sit around the board of directors. They discuss things. All corporations do. When I set up the Hawaiian government, we had 22 people on the board of directors. All have equal voice in discussing how the Constitution was going to be written. I went ahead and I wrote the Constitution and I said, here, this is your foundation to work from. Make it better. You got 22 brains working together. Make it better. And so they made certain changes along there to fit to their culture. I don't know what's in their heads. I'm not going to interfere with their faith or their culture or their religions. I live in Wisconsin. My job is to make sure that the math is correct. When I was elected king, I only guaranteed one thing, that their contract would be correct. I said, I will not interfere with any subject matter. You put your ideas on paper, I'll make sure it's mathematically certified. And that's as far as I'll go with it. And that's what my promise has been for 15 years. And I've always kept my word to that, to all of you. When I gave the Origines their contracts and the Moris their contracts, I did the same thing. You guys make it better. Build a better mousetrap. And I'll make sure that if you come up with a new idea, even if you write it in an adverb verb, I will syntax it and make it correct. And it will read frontwards and backwards, or as many ways as you want to mix up the words, and it will always say the same thing, and then you can vote on it. Everything that becomes contract, accepted by people as a constitution, must be voted on in an open election. Otherwise, the World Court will not sanction the fact that this is a legitimate contract. The opinion of a few have nothing to do with the masses of a national constitution. That has to be voted on by the people. So I put that constitution out there so everyone in the world can read it and find fault with it. And if you can't find fault with it, like I said, if you remove everything that can't be, what is left are the facts. And if the facts are on the table and you agree with them, then vote it in. But always work to make it better, because the world is an ever-changing place.
We can do that, but if a corporation had it wrong, rewrote it in syntax, would all the contracts start from that date, like anything before that? Or would it automatically carry on?
That would be up to the discretion of that corporation. If they're going to write a new syntax contract, they're also have the capacity to fix everything else that was built before that. And they will negotiate with all the people that they are working with.
So they could send you a new contract or a new terms and conditions you sign here. But
right,
then
but as long as your product got there and the money flows back and forth, the contract is just a piece of paper to make sure it happens, right? And all thing we're doing is making the paper better so it happens without any discussion, that we don't have to go to court. Because if there's one thing that you would really like to know, is that you've fulfilled the exact letter of the contract, that there's no gray area, nobody can play a trick on you and call you a no person and then go out and steal what you built in life because you're a no person. And every law says no person shall. Well, the government called you all no persons. Which means they want to steal everything. That's why probate court harvests everything with such a high tax rate when you die, 75%. Unless you're smart enough to go ahead and write a contract and take your assets and put it with your children or with somebody or with another corporation or in a trust so it's protected so it can't be taxed. You got to do your homework ahead of time. And if your contract is written in quantum, it can't go into court because it's a fact. And private contract supersedes judicial law. So make sure your private contracts are correct. That's a fact, folks. Private contract supersedes judicial interference by courts. Husband and wife want to get a divorce, sit down at the kitchen table and do it yourself. You don't even need a lawyer. You sign a private contract, it's done. A lawyer can't undo it, a judge can't undo it. They will approve it 72 hours later. It becomes official. You got to wait 6 months in most cases, and you're free. If you hire a lawyer, 2 lawyers will get you to fight until there's nothing left, and then they will settle because there's nothing to divide. Anybody wants a divorce? Divorce contracts are already written in my book. Copy it out of there. If there's kids involved or no kids involved, I got contracts for both. They've already been approved by the courts, and they're free. Can't beat the price. Yeah.
2 questions. Talking about private contracts, joint ventures, for example, in property deals and so on. That applies there too, in terms of you've got a private agreement between 2 people?
Private contract supersedes, but you have to stay within the confinements of real estate laws and transfer quick claim deeds. Got to be careful. Make sure your taxes are taken care of. Transfer fees are paid. Licensing is done. You've done your, whatever the due diligence is, because don't forget, you don't actually own that property. You bought a contract that was written in adverb verb, and that land came to the government because they killed the people that lived on it, so it's an alien, excuse me, A-I-L-I-N-G, alien, which means corruption from the beginning contract. The military is there to make sure that no one interferes with the illusion of contract as long as you're on it. Don't pay your taxes. 90 days later, you don't live there anymore. They'll find somebody else to pay the taxes and sell it at a tax auction. Simple?
Yep, perfect, thank you. And the other question is syntax language applications to the English language, European language. I heard all that. I heard a multitude of other countries, for example. So has it applied to, say, Asian language and Arabic languages where the formation of sentences is totally different?
When you do the translation on the math, they don't have prepositional phrases also. Even the Hebrew religion doesn't even have vowels. And so when you write things that don't have an English translation, you can't find a word or a meaning for it, you use the English word even though you're writing in all the other languages, you'll put the English words in, and the math will always work the same.
They're not meant to be there.
Huh?
The English word is not meant to be there if there's been a language.
That's where the language was created in adverb verb from the beginning. And the math will put the missing words in, and the math will certify that that word does belong there, or the volition of what that word means. Because you can't have two nouns together and say it makes sense, because it's an adjective pronoun. And you have to certify the terms. If you just write in all nouns like the Hebrew languages, you only have adjective pronouns, and therefore you've lost the ability to identify the 1 in 900 accuracy of the sentence. Therefore, it's chaos. And if you have chaos, no one's going to do contract with you. So now they have a vehicle through this technology to fix it. In 1999, no, that was actually 2000, the Chinese government, better known as Walmart, had only 100 stores in America. And then I went to the embassy in New York City, and I gave them the treaty on the math interface on language, allowing them to translate the 10,000 symbols of the Chinese language into English. Took 6 months. Once they had this technology, they could write a quantumized contract for international trade and bring commerce to the United States and back and forth in 6 hours, not 6 months. Now there's 1,800 stores of Walmart in the United States, controlling $1 trillion a year in commerce. So Chinese really like this. It took things from being a complex picture into a mathematical procedure.
Did you get paid by the hour or by percentage? Only by percentage.
No, this is a gift. I spent $12,500 of my own pocket money to print the books up and then hand-delivered them, including paying my own expenses from A to Z to deliver them to 82 countries and form the treaties.
No appreciation.
And now, well, yeah, because every time somebody touches me, I got 82 countries' ambassadors screaming, "You touched my ambassador." And the amount of commerce that 82 countries can apply pressure to any given country, considering they control 97% of the total wealth of planet Earth, that's a big stick. That's why I'm still standing up here talking to you. I got lots of friends. Got lots of friends. Well, there's other things. Yes.
As you were saying earlier, how all existing adverb-verb contracts will have to be, or will be changed into syntax. What's to stop people as they realise that the original contracts weren't valid, just refusing to accept the new contracts, such as mortgages, credit cards?
I said fiction in, fiction out. It's called volition.
Right.
V-O-L-I-T-I-O-N, volition. The condition of thinking by your own confession is the conduct.
Right.
Now, here's the point. You walk into the bank, and you're going to write a check. Oh, you don't have a pen. Well, okay. So there's a whole jar of pens there. You pick them up, you pull your checkbook out, write your check. You get done with your banking, back and forth, you put your checkbook away, you put your pen in your pocket, and walk out. No problem. Next guy comes in, checks the monitors, got cameras all over the bank, looks at that, looks at the pens, hesitates for a minute, picks one up, goes ahead and does his banking, does his thing. Instead of putting the pen back in the bucket, then asks permission to take it, he checks the monitors to see if anybody's looking and then puts it in his pocket with hesitation, puts his checkbook away and walks out. First guy did his banking. He's innocent because he was doing his business. The second guy just shoplifted a pen. He's guilty of stealing. And a jury will look at the camera because he did this with his eyes and say that man's guilty of body language shoplifting.
80% of conversation is body language.
Yes, exactly. And that body language, there's no words. I mean, the guy could speak Chinese or whatever, and you're in an English bank, and he doesn't know anything from anything. But his body language is going to say he's guilty of he's a thief, he's stealing with volition. And you will be found guilty of volition. And the jury will all come back and prosecute you accordingly.
With volition, I was studying the criminal code the other day, and I've noticed, I think it's section 13, where when someone is persecuted for even the most heinous crimes, the intent of the person at the time when he committed the crime seems to be, according to the code, the major factor in deciding whether he was guilty or not. It's what his intention was at the time.
Everything is based on time. What was your volition at the time of the crime?
Right, so all you have to do is admit that
The only thing you have to do is
didn't think
establish
it was
that.
wrong to do it at the time, and you'd get away with murder.
Well, here's a case. This was a Salt Lake City case where a young girl had a baby, and she was 33 years old, and she had a child, and the grandchild had difficulty and needed a blood transfusion. So the daughter, or the mother of the child, the grandfather came forward to give blood for this child because they had surgery. When they ran the blood thing, it turned out that he was the father. He had raped his daughter when she was 12, which created the child. And it was 20 years later, because of the blood transfusion, that they were able to make a determination that the man was guilty of incest at the age of with a 12-year-old and went to prison for life.
Okay, well, that brings me to the...
So it isn't, it's not, their conduct, the conduct of the time and place is against the law in all cultures worldwide for all time. So it doesn't matter when they catch you. There's no statute of limitations for rape or for murder anywhere in the world. You commit a murder in your country, you can go anywhere in the world, you will be extradited back to your country because all courts are the same jurisdiction worldwide, foreign vessels and dry dock, and they all have rules and regulations for murder and rape and specific drug dealings and criminal activities, treason, conspiracies, spying.
I thought Australia used to have the statute of limitation, now they removed it about 50 years ago.
There's no statute of limitations for murder or for rape. You get found guilty, and they got physical evidence because of CSI, and they can do that through DNA today, you're going to prison. Question?
One thing you mentioned before about birth certificates when we were born, I've heard, that 45 days after we were born, if there wasn't laid claim to, the government then owned that. And you mentioned also a figure of...
45 days of trust is what it's called, because the trustee has not, the trust was created by the birth certificate that the doctor signed, but the trust expired 45 days later, and then the child, which is an issue of woman, now becomes the issue of a state, and the state takes responsibility that if anything happens to the child, that the Social Security trust that was established expired after 45 days, it's then sold into the state as a commercial instrument, and then the state will take care of the child in the event the mother and the father neglect the child or die in a car accident, and we'll take care of things.
And is that the only use for it, or is it? I've heard that it's on-sold by governments as a promissory note.
Right, but you have to put the money into the system so that the money is there for the life of that child, from cradle to grave. Otherwise, there wouldn't be enough dollars in the system to make commerce move, to buy homes, put food on the table, clothing, all the toys that we acquire throughout life. These are all things that are relevant to where did the money come from? Well, it had to be in the system to measure the value of your sweat equity. You give it value as life goes on. If it wasn't there, there wouldn't be enough money for anything. You'd be working for a penny a day rather than being paid $200 or $300 a day to do your job. Right. And fractional banking has to exponentialize itself based on the amount of things. Did you pay for the roads that are out here? I mean, you love running around on the roads. You love all your technology with your cars. You love all your modern conveniences. You want to give them up just because you want to make an argument about what the dollar's worth? It gets things done, doesn't it? And it really makes your life go smooth. You don't want to go from here to Sydney in 4 months because you're in a covered wagon. You want to get there in 8 hours if you want to drive a car, or an hour by plane. You like the toys. And so you don't question how you get there. You just want to make sure it's there. And today, technology commands that the world's going to move forward. Screaming, and doesn't matter. People are not going to give up their toys. Anybody in here want to give up your Blackberries, or your iPods, or your cell phones, or your computers, and go back to watching 3-channel TV in black and white, and be bored out of your tree? Not being able to learn about all the millions of things that are on Wikipedia, and having instant access to anything that you can think of, you can get an answer for today without going down to the library, spending an hour to drive there, look up in the books for months before you find out what's going on. Instead, you just takes 5 seconds and you got it in front of you on a computer screen or on your cell phone. The world is so fast, and our brains want more and more and more. We can comprehend 10,000 thoughts a second. I mean, how fast do you blow through your computer? Your computer 10 years ago was 100 megabytes of memory. And you thought that was all the memory in the world. We paid $100 for another megabyte of memory. Today you get a gigabyte or 10 gigabytes for $20. And our computers are running in the terabyte speeds with 8 gig hard drives. And as fast as we can push the buttons, we can read the screens and download information. And the more we learn, the faster we learn. And it exponentializes itself. And your brain doesn't want to give up that information.
Of course not. We just don't want to pay for it.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. Get over it.
The reason I ask this is because there are a number of people who suggest that originally, because we haven't been informed about that birth certificate situation, that the government has actually committed fraud, and therefore it has utilised the value of the money in that account without our knowledge, so that when we go and borrow money from the bank, we're actually borrowing our own money.
Actually, it isn't your money.
No.
It isn't until you sign over and say you're going to put your life on the line for the next 30 years and pay it back. And don't they give you a contract? You don't care what that contract says. Did you ever read it and syntax it? No. The only thing you want is a roof over your head to take care of your wife and your children. You don't care what that car loan says. You want to be able to get to work without walking in the rain. You want these conveniences, and you're willing to accept the illusion in order to function. And the government will allow you these illusions as long as they get a piece of it called commerce. Taxation. Taxation is you paying the military to guarantee the value of your money. If you don't believe me, walk up to a police officer with a $5 note, put a match to it, and watch how long it takes you to arrest you because you destroyed commerce. That law applies to every postal employee, which controls all military worldwide. And that includes police officers, sheriffs, bailiffs, military personnel. They're all there to guarantee the value of their dollar, so that the commerce between countries flows, your food gets here, the raw resources get here, people got work. Otherwise, if people don't have work and they're starving, they're going to riot. They don't want to riot, so they're going to make sure that the value of the money is guaranteed and that you're going to pay the service fee of the military to guarantee that money.
If you don't sign your tax form in the box?
Who cares?
Well, what's the tax?
You can have 100% of nothing or 70% of 100. What do you think is a better deal?
No, what I'm saying is, as an individual, the claim is that if you don't sign in the box, that it's not a contract, and therefore you shouldn't have had to pay tax. That's basically because...
Again, you don't have the capacity to guarantee the value of the money. The military does. The military makes sure that the banks pay you your money. The banks, that the storekeeper will honor your money when you take it there to buy your groceries so that you eat today. Otherwise, you'd be dead in 10 days from starvation. It's about guarantees all across the board. There's all different kinds and levels of guarantees. The money guarantees. It's just a vehicle to measure the commerce, to measure your sweat equity. And you don't want to work for nothing. And you don't want the guy that's laying there sleeping, watching TV all day while you're out working, and he says, well, I have a right to everything that you make. Remember the story of the little red hen who plows the field, seeds it, harvests, and the pigs come along and say, you got too much, we want it. That's socialism. You don't like that. If you're going to earn something and build it, you want to acquire your sweat equity. So the government says you'll have your sweat equity in this free economy, but we're going to take a portion of it to guarantee the value of it, and we're going to keep the books on this here. And the money that you pay into taxes will not only take care of the military, paying them to protect you, so that the Chinese don't plant rice in your backyard tomorrow, or anybody else for that fact to trespass. You want those guarantees that a criminal isn't going to bust into your house and hurt you, that the police are going to put out, capture the bad guys, the firemen are going to put out the fire, the ambulance is going to be there when you have a heart attack. You like all those conveniences. And so those services exist in the event there's an emergency. You live on the coast here. Supposing you have a 9.8 earthquake off in New Zealand. You guys are close enough to, can you survive a 200-foot tsunami come crashing into your city here? What do you think the end result of that's going to be? And who's going to pick up the pieces afterwards? It's like watching New Orleans get washed away by a hurricane and see the level of what a disaster is, or that earthquake that took place off of Indonesia, killed 235,000 people because they don't have an infrastructure or any way to protect themselves and didn't have early warning. We like all these toys because it guarantees your condition of life. The world isn't perfect, but they are building more satellites and more early warning systems and trying to make things better. You know what would be the real big disaster? There's a crack in the big island of Hawaii. That volcano on Big Island is 10 miles tall. That crack represents 100 cubic miles of mass. If that falls into the trench 35,000 feet deep, it will produce a 100-foot high tsunami in the entire Pacific Rim. You realize the damage it would do to San Francisco, LA, Tokyo, Singapore, Shanghai, Hong Kong, your cities along Australia here, you'd all be hit with a 100-foot tsunami, and it would be multiple waves of it. What happened in Indonesia? That'd be a drop in the bucket. A billion people die if that volcano ever goes pop and knocks that chunk off into the ocean. It's a disaster waiting to happen, and everyone on the planet knows it's there. What do you think would happen if Yellowstone National Park erupted? That's a volcano 40 miles wide and 60 miles long. 2/3 of the United States would be destroyed. The world economy would not exist because of the commerce that would be lost. 60% unemployment on the planet, and about half the population of the planet would die because they couldn't get food, because that's the breadbasket of the world. All because of a single volcano, which erupts every few 100,000 years.
It's gone 5, so let's leave it.
Sure. So what I'm telling you is that there's a lot of things on the planet. We live on an angry planet. We have, the world's trying to do the best they can to guarantee the survival of mankind. Global warming.
There's no global warming, but that's fine.
I know, okay.
There's no such thing as global warming.
Have you been monitoring the North Pole?
Yeah.
Ice cap?
The scientists who don't work for the government are monitoring it.
30, in the last 30% of the pack has shrunk.
No, it hasn't. It's just the way the world actually moves. It's natural form. There's actually more ice around than there.
But when the permafrost comes out, the methane that's been trapped for 50,000 years has been released, and methane is 50 times more potent than carbon.
There's no toxins. Speak to Lord Monkton. Lord Monkton.
Yeah, there's a lot of research.
He's just conducted a huge seminar in
from
Australia.
a lot of scientists.
You've seen all over the TV in Australia.
I've heard both sides. Okay, there's arguments on both sides about global warming and no global warming, okay? And that's a subject matter, okay? And that's outside the jurisdiction of the syntax of the seminar. We can debate, just like you can debate religions, you can debate politics, you can debate global warming political issues, but that has nothing to do with, that's a science issue versus communications. I don't know the truth, one way or the other. I've researched both of them, and both sides have valid arguments. And so the only thing we can do is wait and see what happens. Yes.
you talk about a free economy. I'm not sure how free the economy is, and I'm certainly not comfortable with the military guaranteeing my dollar and holding me to sweat equity for the rest of my life to validate the dollar. I guess I wanted to talk about volition. You talk about the volition of contract, whether it's in fiction or it's in truth. The volition is probably the most important thing. So if the case is that the central banks lend money to the governments and the central banks are privately owned, and then the banks collude with these central banks to then, through fractional reserve lending, enslave everybody, what's the volition of their contract?
Well, they made it available to you and you accepted it. You didn't go out there and say, you didn't go to the bank and say, I'm going to syntax your mortgage contract. They said, who's got the money to buy the house? And they said, well, you got to go to the bank or credit union. You can go to private individuals, but private individuals don't, unless they're a family member, probably wouldn't give you any money. So if you want the money, you got to play the game to get the house, so you got a roof over your head and support your family. And if you would have taken the time, you could have wrote your own contract in syntax first and took it to the bank and said, will you accept this? Because it's correct.
But isn't the volition of the lender incorrect if they're stating that they have risk, but they make digits out of nothing? So what's their risk?
Does the lender have an education to understand quantum language? Did he take this course, or does he even understand the fact that there is syntax available to him? The answer is, if you walk into the bank and ask any bank teller or bank president, do you understand what the word syntax means? They're going to go, no. You look at his eyes. Some people are absolutely surprised when they hear the word syntax. They go, I don't even know what that means. And they really are starstruck. Define it for me. And then you start showing them little pieces of information, and all of a sudden like they go, oh, we got a problem. And then they get scared. Am I going to lose my job if I ruffle the feathers of the other people who don't understand the syntax? Because remember what I told you? First rule of business is, don't hire your replacement. Nobody wants to lose their job. When I got arrested in New Zealand last week, the immigration officer, after I syntaxed his immigration form, says, I'm paid to do that. I'm paid to lie to you. And I don't want to lose my job because unemployment is 12% in New Zealand. So what's the guy saying to you? He's going to break the law just to keep his job. And that's what we're dealing with all over the world.
Somewhere the lie's got to stop, and the true volition has to come in because the world's enslaved.
That's why I'm doing these seminars. You've got to educate enough people so that you can vote correctness in. As long as people don't know, they won't change. You didn't know for 8,500 years, and 8,500 years nobody changed. The only thing that people do is they go to war with each other. You know, Odell said to me once, Odell was a chief judge's clerk. She says, people are angry. People who are angry file lawsuits. Business is good. I have job security. Yes.
It's on the same subject, just a different facet of it. I want to confirm what I hear you saying is that if people sign an agreement that is not made in quantum language, but it's in
volition,
by their own volition, verb, adverb, regardless of whether the word, and they both assume they understand what each other are discussing and they've agreed on that contract, whether it be a house contract or buying a car or even on a constitution. Because they voted on it, does that make it binding?
Yes, because both of you signed it.
So what you're saying, our constitution...
They offered, you accepted, and you're both going to comply with it, and if you don't, where are you going to go? You're going to go into an adverb-verb court that's going to enforce the adverb-verb law.
So what you're saying, our constitution that we voted in 1900, regardless of whether it's written in quantum language or not, is binding.
Well, it was binding until I rewrote it. Now people can stand up with the correct one and say, how come you guys didn't follow your own syntax that you wrote in your own styles manual, and you went out there and you broke the law for the last 100 years? Why don't you know how to read and write? Why are you claiming that you know how to read and write, taking a paycheck for it, but you actually don't know how to read and write?
But nobody's voted the one that you rewrote. Therefore, the parties have not agreed on it.
People are still looking at it. It hasn't gone to the referendum. In other words, government has to stand up and say, we have a new constitution here. On Tuesday, in 90 days from now, we are going to vote on it. Do you want to stay with the old one, adverb, verb, or do you want to accept a new one? If you accept a new one, we're going to have to change contracts.
So,
And it's through the education of people. That's why I have my website up for 10 years. That's why I write these books and tapes, so that we're trying to educate as many people as possible so we get the controlling vote globally to fix it. Eventually, it's got to get fixed. You can't lie to everybody. You can fool some of the people some of the time, most of the people all the time, but not all of the people all the time. And at some point, you're going to wake up and lie to everybody. You can fool some of the people some of the time, most of the people all the time, but not all of the people all the time. And at some point, you're going to wake up and say, we're not in Kansas anymore, total, and you want it fixed.
right, but
That's why
practice,
we're all senior citizens here.
in practice, we still bound. So we're still bound. In practice, we're still bound. We can't just go to a court and saying, well, here's what I want in quantum language, and they say, no, this is our constitution we follow. We don't recognize your new version of a constitution.
But they do. Some of the court judges are brought up to speed. They agree with the quantum language, and because you are in a closed area called a courtroom on a closed contract in both the parties suing, both the claimant and the vassalee, and the judge are all on the same page of quantum, we will have a quantum trial, and the rules and regulations of the quantum contract will be upheld. It's when you have a discrepancy between a licensed adverb, a person that's an adverb verb, with a judge who's an adverb verb, and an individual who has quantum language where you have a conflict of fact and fiction, and fact and fiction can never meet.
Okay. So
But a lie is still a lie under the rules of perjury, and we have signed confession that it committed perjury. So now they have to do one of two things. They either have to adapt truth or vacate their fiction.
So the only reason it becomes binding is because you're dealing with the difference between a truth and a lie, and the truth eventually wins out.
Exactly, and
Not
because I
because
paid
we
a fee to file the document and he signed it, I have a contract, commercial contract, and that stamp on here makes it a commercial contract. Even though they may say the money is fiction, this stamp is a gold certificate under law of the flag, and this contract is binding between two people because we have a whole value of gold. And therefore, when you explain the facts and you know what the facts are, then the judge has to agree with that. But you also have to get the judge off his plane, and you do that by contract and saying there are no planes in this court. And put that one little sentence in there. There are no boxes, there are no plane, and law of the flag has jurisdiction here today. And
The law
remove
of the-
all illusion. Law of the flag.
Law of the flag, okay.
Law of the flag says, if you don't wish to make contract, do not come under my flag. And you read about flags of all different countries. Look at the Olympics that are taking place right now in Vancouver. Every nation that's participated, what's the first thing they walked in with? They had a flag up. They were all under their flag. And when they win, they get their gold medal, they put up their flag. It's always the flag of the country comes first before the people in the awards.
So the judge and the other party can refuse to accept the flag. That means what happens with a court case or the...
Oh no. No, that flag's got jurisdiction. And that flag is defined in the court, on the paper. And when he holds that document, that is the court. It isn't the room, it's the piece of paper. That's the vessel that flies the flag. He's bound by this flag. And if he's holding up, he goes, oh, you mean this contract? He's holding the flag up. And you can capture him by saying, you've just traversed with my flag. You're under law of the flag. Your seal is a cartoon character and has no jurisdiction because there's no flags here. If you do it right, you know about the stamp and the flag and the endorsement and the terminology of syntax, you will prevail in your court because they can't make it go away. It's physical evidence. Doesn't matter if the guy wants to play games and say, well, go away. I'm going to dismiss this. He can't DIS, demon god of the underworld for mischief, against quantum. You can't vacate quantum unless you do it in quantum. So if a judge hands you an adverb-verb order, it's no contract. Syntax it, attach it to another complaint, and file it back into court and sue him for fraud. He now becomes a defendant against himself.
You make it sound so simple.
It is simple. I do it all the time. I've been doing it for 30 years. Okay, guys. Well, it's 5:25. Tomorrow we're going to put some, the Australian 1953 law that made the Origine flag legal, or as it was called, an act by Elizabeth. We're going to write that up here. I'm going to syntax it for you, and then I'm going to write you the correct version of it. Well, also, anybody else got any sentence structure that you want me to dissect? We'll work on dissecting that, because every sentence that we put up here is going to become a seminar in itself. Where the words came from, why the words have to be changed, the cause and effect of why these things have to be broken apart and then put back together to make sense. And I can do that. When we did the seminars over in Auckland, we spent 2 days, 16 hours dissecting sentences, and at the end of 16 hours, about half the people got a little bit of it. It's not as easy as you think. I can do it, and you can see it happen, and you can understand it as I do it, but then I give it to you and I say, do it. You're going to go, what's an adverb? What's an adjective? How do I identify these things? Well, this is where it comes through repetition. That's why I say it takes 200 hours to shift your gears and become proficient like Stephen is. And once you get this, you can't be lied to by anybody. You are empowered. You can walk into court with your head held high and knock them all down. I guarantee you, you'll feel really good. Not only that, you're going to have everybody that's got agreements or a lawsuit hire you at $100 an hour to help them with their lawsuits. Make a hell of a good living.
You said only $100 an hour. It's not.
All right, 200. I'm financially independent.
So, David, what you're saying is it's not about arguing fiction with fiction, which is what probably a lot of people in the room have been doing. Let's go to court and say, let's talk, but let's talk with the truth. And if they're not prepared to, then you notice them and you're going to sue them for
The only thing all of you can ever talk about when you go into court is what just happened.
The here and now.
What just happened? Huh? You can't tell me what I did. What just happened?
we witnessed something.
Right, you're all witnesses. You can only talk about you. You have been damaged or you have been rewarded. You have witnessed something taking place. What did you witness? You witnessed the modification of language to to create perjury. If you witness and can prove perjury through modification of language, the case has to be vacated. Who brought the case? The DA, the judge, the police officer? If they lied, they lost jurisdiction because it's a criminal act. The case is mute. They have to be held to a high standard.
Sound like a marriage counselor teaching us how to use iMessages.
It's all about talking about yourself. You can the only proof you have about anything that's ever happened in your life is what's in your personal brain. You can't talk about anything you see, only about who you know, who you are, and what you know. And when you get to learn, when you learn that one sentence, how to identify the damage that you are a party to or a victim of, the damage you're a victim of, because of modification of language, you will prevail in stopping fiction from damaging you. Have fun tonight, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you. As far as any questions go, that you remember later, send me an email and I'll answer them, write them up. I answer emails all the time. As this process goes on, you do more study, you have more awareness. You can contact me as long as you want to stay in the program, you can contact me. There's no cost at it. So. I wrote up here an act, 1953. This is when the Origine flag was, Queen Elizabeth had recognized the Origine flag. And this is what she wrote to go ahead and give it its approval. Now, as you know, and is an article and for and act. AN always appears in front of a word starts with a vowel. But because they left out with an act or for an act or by an act, They didn't use the prepositional phrase, so this now becomes an adverb, not an article, in front of a word that means no contract, because it's a vowel and two consonant. So then she goes ahead and says to declare. Now, DE means no, and clare is speak. And it's also a future tense adverb, which now takes declare to be a future tense no speak. So she said nothing. A certain flag now becomes undefined as to what flag she's referring to, making it an adjective pronoun, calling the flag a no, no, no. To is an adverb in future time, modifying the be condition of now time, but now it's used as a verb, which is an illusion. Then the is an adverb, making Australia to be a coloring national flag. So therefore it's another adjective pronoun. To make, again, in the future, which has no now time jurisdiction, which means you shall never make, now is a verb instead of a condition of state. Other is a vowel and two consonants, a no contract word. Adverb, now to make provision, PRO means no, VIS is sight, and ION is contract. You cannot see the flag. And it's also used as the coloring of the pronoun flag. And then with respect, re meaning no, inspector comes from phantom. So if you have no phantom condition, in future time, to flags as a dangling participle verb. You can't end a sentence in a verb. She's ending it as a dangling participle verb and then signs it. Is there any nouns on the page, or any facts on the page? Well, the answer is no. There's no prepositional phrases. There's no condition of lodio ownership. And she's given no now time jurisdiction to anything. So every word has been a condition of future or negative. So there is absolutely no condition or certification for a now time origine flag. And yet, since 1953, for the past 50 years, they have pretended to treat the flag as being a national Australian flag. But this is the type of information. Does Queen Elizabeth have jurisdiction here? Well, she claims to be your postmaster. But has the postal treaty ever been written with the correct sentence structure, communication syntax? The answer is no. So therefore, Queen Elizabeth, as postmaster, has no treaty whatsoever, trust, or contract with the entire country of Australia. She also has no standing in this country because she's not an aborigine. So therefore, she's an illusion that has come here pretending to be something that isn't, because there's no contract. And furthermore, you've got, when you do the violation on language to fool the people, you've lied as pretending to be a public figure and then telling lies to the people. This is perjury, which is a criminal act in every language. Excuse me?
Isn't it also considered treason to knowingly lie to the people?
No, treason is an act, it's called constructive treason, which means contract treason. Now, contract treason is when you sign a contract to perform a specific duty. A microphone. Contract treason is when you sign a specific contract to perform a specific duty. Actual treason takes place during time of war. You have to be under a declaration of war to commit treason, and that carries a death sentence in all countries worldwide. The constructive treason portion, if you join the military, but it's peacetime and you do something wrong, you probably wind up in jail for 20 years.
Right. My understanding of declaration of war is setting yourself up as an authority and governing the people unknowingly doing and carrying out such acts as to purposely hurt the people by removing their rights, various rights that they have, like human rights.
Okay. When you use the word declaration, you're saying no spoken contract. And throughout the history of mankind, war has always been an issue of trespass and mind control. If I don't control your mind, I put a bullet or an arrow in it. And that's basically the fundamental. Anything that is acquired through war is called alien, A-I-L-I-N-G, which means corruption from the beginning. Mm-hmm. A conquering country, like when, say, Germany invaded Poland. After the war was over, Russia invaded Poland. And after Russia left in 1989, all the land that was taken in both the World War II by the Germans and then seized under communist control from the Russians was all given back to the original title, lodial title owners of 1938.
So it is not just about the land, it's also about mind control or controlling the free will of other people.
That's correct.
Well, in that case, then most of the laws which have in some way taken away or reduced or made the citizens of Australia believe that they have no rights or their certain rights have been reduced and that those rights are given by the government rather than that
they're making everything to be a privilege.
Right. That's a declaration of war in that case.
No, that's just misinformation.
If that misinformation has been carefully designed for the purpose of making the people believe that they don't have those rights, then
the minute they believe that they don't have something, they turn to voluntary compliance through fear of guns and clubs, better known as rape.
right.
Rape is the performance of one human being over another without their permission or against their will.
And if this was designed to be executed in such a way, and it's pre-thought.
Yes, and so what they do is they give you all kinds of toys, benefits, have you sign contracts, driver's licenses, Social Security, make all kinds of promises to you, but inadvertently you become a good slave and 88 cents on a dollar that you earn goes to the government.
So forcefully enforcing a law that is not a law is not upon people, unsuspecting people, it's not a declaration of war.
As we've proven here, there is no treaty, trust, or contract written with the correct sentence structure here or in any other country worldwide, and it hasn't been for 8,500 years.
Right.
But to rewrite mankind's history, you have to, that's why I established a constitution in quantum language. We take the same volition of what was intended or how the people believe it should be. We took away the future tense, we took away the past tense, we took away the negative words, we replaced everything with now time, prepositional phrases to articulate an order of operations that puts every single fact in its correct position of having an individual having knowledge, declaring that knowledge through the verb of thinking, making a claim for that knowledge, contracting with that knowledge in the correct sentence structure, communication syntax, and then authorizing it through their authors, their authentic condition, their authentic volition, so that we have a performance that the person knows that what they're doing when they do it. It's not an accident. When you go into court, one of the things that the judges have to go through, can you read and write? How far did you go in school? Do you have a driver's license, which means you can operate an automobile? Do you know how to run a computer? Do you understand the words they've been spoken to you? Have they offered you or intimidated you to perform a specific way or say a specific thing when you pleaded guilty for the crimes you were charged with and to come to an arbitrated settlement? And the individual who's sitting there will go, no, 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 you know, I participated, I'm doing this under my own volition, I've given up my constitutional rights, which means the right to contract with somebody else to go ahead and you're throwing yourself on the mercy of the court. I've seen some people get good deals. I've seen other people wind up with life in prison when they thought they were going to get parole.
Yeah, I'm looking at much earlier than
punch.
that. When a group of people knowingly set themselves up in an unconstitutional manner for the purpose of enslaving the people and pretending they have a right to govern, but their intention from the beginning was done not to govern but to control. Isn't that
that's the court system.
Isn't that? Are they not a foreign power?
Of course, all courthouses worldwide are foreign vessels and dry dock. When you go into a courthouse, you are no longer in Australia. You have left it, you might as well be on Mars.
So if a foreign power declares itself to be the chosen of the people, declares themselves to be a government, and they set out to enslave the government, is not to enslave the people, which they pretend what they swear to protect, is that not a declaration upon the people that they sworn to protect?
Like you said, the word declaration, they haven't said anything. It's just the illusion that you believe exists. But when you syntax it like we syntax this, it doesn't exist. It's not even here and now time. It's an illusion. But you've been brainwashed to try and use all of these things in now time. But it isn't in now time. Syntax is a word, and the operations of using syntax have been banned from all schools, universities, dictionaries, everything, so people don't know where to look. If you don't, this is the only program taught globally in all countries on syntax and all the secrets of government, the laws, order of operations, and it's mathematically certified. Same as a math problem. And that's the unique thing. People have tried to do what I've done, but they didn't have a math interface to prove it frontwards and backwards, to justify why do I need a prepositional phrase or a positional lodial fact. And this is where this technology was accepted by all governments and allowing me to teach it worldwide, because the government can't rule the people with a lie, because everyone knows it's a lie now. So they know it's got to get fixed, and they don't have anybody qualified to teach it. So they're allowing me to make the videotapes, the books, and teach this globally and be the spokesperson for this technology, because I own the copyrights on it.
What is a declaration?
Declaration means no spoken contract. D is no, Claire is speak, and ION is contract.
Okay. So if a law or a proposed law is
Propose, P-R-O means no. Pose, take some position. A position means to have a fact or location. You have no location law. What you need is a contract, a correct sentence structure, communication syntax contract. It's that simple. Grumble, 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 mutiny, mutiny, mutiny.
Oh, thank you.
The questions that he is asking are legitimate. I mean, he's done a good job of standing up here and challenging me. Now, when I did San Diego, we had a man stand up and do about 69 questions. The rest of the people in the audience got irritated with it. And I told everyone in the audience, I says, this guy works for me. He's supposed to ask these questions. He's not dominating the thing. What he was the clerk of the court for a federal judge for 8 years. And what he did is he was paid by the courts to go around to all the different people that would put seminars on against the Internal Revenue Service, against government, and embarrass them and disqualify their program every time, no matter where they showed up in Los Angeles or San Diego. And you've got a population of 38 million people in Southern California. So he had a full-time job every weekend of going out there and just taking these guys apart. Well, when he ran into me, I took him apart. And even though he asked really good questions, he didn't know anything about quantum language. So he was working from a fiction point of view, and I took his perspective and completely changed it, and he went after his own judge that hired him to go after me. And he came to 13 seminars consecutively. And he would get up and he would say, he would challenge me the same way a judge would challenge you in court. So what he is doing, the questions he's asking, are doing you a service, because if you didn't know or didn't prepare yourself for the level of these questions to be answered, and you want to go up in front and sue a federal judge or a state judge or a magistrate, I said, you're going to put yourself in harm's way. Don't do something half-baked, because you will have a nice day in orange pajamas and 3 hots and a cot, and you don't want to go there. So anybody thinks they're ready to go to court, call me up. Try and run your scenarios past me. And if you can get past me, because I'm the guy that prosecutes judges, and I know all those secrets, if you can get past me, then I'll say you're ready to go to court. I'll even fly down there and back you up on the thing, if you're that good. So it's not a free cakewalk out here. That's why nobody goes into court and does this thing. And you guys got adrenaline. I don't have adrenaline. My adrenal glands were removed when I was 25 years old. I don't have a fear factor. So the flight Fright to flight, I don't have that. My hobby is mountain climbing, hanging off a 1,000-foot cliff. You know, that's just so much fun. Any questions about this? Go ahead, ask me questions while I'm getting the next thing written up here.
Got a question, David, before you flub too much there off.
Okay.
What I don't get about this is how you designate a part of speech to its word when it's used in a different way.
Oh, that's easy. The words, an adverb modifies a verb. An adverb can connect the verb and can connect to a pronoun in front of it. But it modifies an adjective and it modifies a verb. And that's it, or another adverb. So the mathematical operations of syntax has to go frontwards and backwards evenly. Now, when the government created the adverb, adjective, and pronoun, these three parts of speech, they always get the operations of modification correct to create nothing. They don't use prepositional phrases or position-lodial facts. They don't make any declaration or rather, they don't make a claim about what is and are. Because they're misusing all the words that they're going to put up here. And if you go to a dictionary, you won't find most of these words in a dictionary. You can't find a verb flag in a dictionary. You only find it as a fact. It'll say noun in a dictionary. But then a noun, it'll have noun is spelled N-O-U-N, which is no-no. And the reason this is a no-no is because here it's used as an adverb verb. So they tell you it's a no-no in the dictionary, and you think that a noun is a fact, it's a no-no. And they're advertising that effect. If they were going to use a fact, they'd say a fact, but they don't use facts. In the entire dictionary, in 1828, Webster, when he wrote the first dictionary, he said the bastardization of the English language is the worst crime I could commit against mankind. I have to make a living, which means he was paid by the government to bastardize the dictionary. Webster was an attorney. Yes?
To, in the dictionary, if you looked it up, would be a preposition, right?
To has 38 definitions, and they're in the book. I have one complete page dedicated to the word to. It is the most bastardized word in the entire English language because, one, it's in the future, and you can use it I can use to in all conditions of language. It's only used once as a noun. It's only used, if you use it as a preposition, I'm going to the farm. To is a preposition, but now it's in future time, which means you don't have now-time jurisdiction. For the knowledge of the person is with the traveling at the location of the farm. See, that way.
Oh.
You've got to change your words around. It's a longer sentence.
I'll get it soon.
And you say you're going to the store from the house. To is in future, from is in past, and you got two ideas in one sentence. Weren't you always taught that a sentence is one idea? Well, see, it seems really easy for you to fall into that trap because the reason for thinking is to abolish thinking. Why would you write a 13-word sentence or a resignation letter with 60 words when the only thing is I quit? That's the end of it, right? I is a pronoun, or rather I is an adverb making quit a verb. But quit is a condition of a state, not a verb. If you're saying I quit, but you want to explain it quantum, it would take 60 words to get through it. So the reason for thinking is to abolish the 60 words and jump over and take a shortcut. But as you've been told your whole life, the shortcut is always going to get you in trouble. You got to do things the long way. You can't take well, just like when you all did long division in high school. We wanted to go ahead and take shortcuts and not show our work. And most of the time we got the wrong answer when we took a shortcut. Or the teacher says, if you don't show your work, you haven't proven that you understand long division and how to go through all the monotonous steps of getting to the correct answer. That's why it was mandatory that you learn these little lessons, because the shortcut is not the easiest way in life. You have to do things the long way so you're thorough. Question.
The use of the Origine flag, where does that stand in regards to that being a fiction if you were using the Origine flag as your flag?
Well, this was written in future time. The Queen wrote this.
Mm-hmm.
And this was her act that she passed on to your country here to acknowledge. But did you see any acknowledgement here? How do you spell acknowledge? A-C-K, no contract, which means you have no knowledge. Is this a knowledgeable statement? So if I say, well, I'm going to acknowledge this statement, I just said I have no knowledge of the statement because the statement doesn't say anything. So you believe that acknowledge means to pay attention and have a response, where in fact I just said to you, I don't know what this says because it doesn't say anything. And I just proved it doesn't say anything, and I used the word that says it doesn't say anything. But if you don't know the rules about a vowel to consonant, you'll go through your entire life and use negative conditions of state and always get there. Just like the World Court, it's called the International Court, right? In means no, T-E-R is terra, nation is people, all is contract. So there's no earth, people, contract. And every lawsuit filed since 1945 at the World Court was written in adverb verb except the 3 quantum ones that I sent in. There was a 7-year wait to have your case heard at the World Court. I get mine done in about 48 hours because the Act has jurisdiction over all the illusions. And the other thing is that the court, when we introduced all this technology, gave all the judges claims of the live life, had them sign oaths, made them postmasters, bankers, and judges in quantum. Russell and I did this. When I went to Amsterdam back in, I believe it was 2004, I got off the bus, and the guards were standing at the guard shack that's probably about 300 feet away. And as I walked up, they said, Judge Miller! I walked up to him and he says, how did you know? He says, oh, we've been studying your material for 2 years. We knew you when you got off the bus. We know your body language and what you look like. I says, don't you want to see my passport? And he goes, not required. He says, we know who you are. We know what you sound like. He says, all the guys at the court here study your material. All the judges do too, and all the clerks. He says, you're welcome. You can run anywhere you want here. No restrictions. And I went there with a banker friend. And they said, this guy can't come in. He said, and he was here to check on a lawsuit. He says, well, he's with me. Well, if you're going to vouch for him, then he can come in with you. Otherwise, this guy would have flown over to Amsterdam, spent $3,000 for a round-trip airfare and hotel accommodations, and been standing outside the gate and not allowed to go in. And the same thing is at the Supreme Court of the United States. I go in there, and the first time I went in, I said, I'd like to see William Rehnquist, Supreme Court Justice of the United States. The guard says, do you have an appointment? I says, no, I'm charging him with treason. I says, and I have his signed confession. And they're going, sit down, you're under arrest. So I got 6 guards, they completely surround me. And Rehnquist comes down, he meets me face to face. I tell him I'm a real person. He fully understood what it said, and he fully understood how the people in Hawaii, the judges, couldn't read and write, and were just trying to run a bullshit scam against the Supreme Court. And the Hawaiian judges didn't know that they were prepared, waiting for them to walk into a trap. And they got thrown out of the Supreme Court with a real bad embarrassment. And this was all published in the newspapers. That was back 26th of February 2009.
So then to use any flag, if you establish it yourself in quantum language, it has standing.
Right. We have a lot of people that have, here in Australia, have copyrighted the flag of Australia already. They actually went down and they sat down and I checked their declaration, their claim for the flag, its dimensions, and in every single detail. That the sentence structure was correct, and they filed a claim for it.
Because of the understanding, if the flag isn't sort of recognised, it's a pirate flag.
Well, you have different shapes. You have a 3x4 flag, you have a 5x7 flag, you have a 1x2 flag. The 3x4 flag is your boat flag. The 3x5 flag is your military base flag. So 1x2 flag is a constitutional flag. And then you have different colors. You can change the color of the blue field. You can change the different shades of red. And you won't even know you're in a different flag. There's another thing, so as I get this off here, I'll show you some stuff about flags.
Before you wipe the bottom line, you have the word flags as a dangling participle verb.
Correct.
What is the infinitive of the verb flag or flags?
I don't understand your question.
Well, if that's a verb, then what is it in its pure state as an infinitive?
It should be using a prepositional phrase, by the flags.
Well, if it's by the flags, then that would be a noun, wouldn't it?
It would be a fact, correct.
Well, you said it's a dangling participle verb. What would make it a verb?
To is an adverb. An adverb
Always goes
modifies. Modification is a change. A change is a motion. A motion is an action. An action is a verb.
So you're saying just because it has the word to in front of it, that automatically makes the next word after it a verb, even
Correct.
though it's, and if that's not normally a verb, it's a dangling participle verb.
Because you're ending a sentence in a verb. You can't end sentences in verbs.
Right. So
And-
what
and you'll
meaning
have-
does that have in the sentence now?
What?
What meaning does that have? What's the real
Nothing.
meaning?
That's just it. The Queen is saying, we don't recognize the flags of Australia. We don't recognize anything. We never had a contract to recognize. We don't have lodial title to Australia. We killed the Aborigines and we stole their land. We built our buildings and our roads on top of it, and we haven't paid docking fees to put the road in Australia. They owe the Aborigines 173 years of back rent to dock their vessels on the land. That's about a $40 trillion paycheck for the Aborigines.
Do you think this was knowingly done?
Yes, it was. I can prove it. We did the same thing in Hawaii and the same thing in New Zealand. See, the unique thing about Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, the Philippines, all these small places where Cook showed up and then the English showed up afterwards, the English, it might have been an English ship, but it was controlled by the post office. This is all about the post office, folks, from 1800 all around the world, all these sailing trips that took place. And these declarations that showed up was always the post office. What's the first thing that happens? One, the ship shows, the post office shows, the ship shows up, and it's always a military vessel. All military captains on a vessel are masons and postmasters. And they take their orders from the Masonic order in Bern, Switzerland, and the Vatican, and the Central Masonic Lodge in London. I don't care what government you're working with, it's all controlled by the Central Post Office. Then as a Mason, they use the philosophies to control people, and they initiate the kings and the queens of those jurisdictions that they go into. They tell them they will give them anything they want and teach them all these philosophies to manage people and be successful. But when they join the Masons, they have to give up and surrender their king and queen titles and do what the Masons tell them. The Masons will then compensate them and give them the royalty and all of the fluff that makes them look all powerful. Because the other people that control the banks, which is the money, control the shipping, the commerce, the import, the export, that do the engineers, that bring in educated people that have engineering technology. You put all these things together, every one of them are Masons. That's where the secret society issue comes in. They all work together to honor the head Mason, who is the king or the queen, but that's the puppet. He gets all the flack. He gets all the honor. It comes with the flack. While the postmaster, who is the postmaster general, runs everything, which is the port authorities, the money, and the transportation. Everybody wants to move. Everybody wants a freedom of movement. Nobody wants to sit in one place. You get bored. Boredom is a real bad pill to swallow. So the postmaster is going to make travel, build nice roads, and get the population establish voting, and then put all these toys out there that you're going to vote on because you like your freedoms. You like your running water and your shower and your 200 channel TV and all these things at the expense of the people who own the land. But then the people who own the land, if they were stubborn enough to fight them, they all died of some natural cause, prematurely. And then the rest of the people that can't fight the technology. You watched the news last night, the Falkland Islands. They just discovered they have 60 billion barrels of oil off the Falkland Islands that the British are going to drill. The Argentine government is up in uproar because they claim that the Falkland Islands belongs to them, but they don't have the technology or the money to go to a war, another war, with Britain. Because Britain's got nukes and they got missiles and they got enough toys to do a lot of damage to Argentina.
You mean they need a plenipotentiary judge to give him a hand?
I could go down there, yes, and with a contract, I could say, this is illegal, boys and girls. Show us your contract. You're trespassing. This is an international violation. But England's a small island and they need, you know, England's pulling this, we got squatters' rights because we got bigger guns and bigger clubs. That don't make it right. But that's always been the case. That's what they did here in Australia. That's what they did in New Zealand.
Okay, back to syntax. On the word to, you've got 1.9. Does that mean it's a
future tense word?
Adverb?
It's not only it's an adverb, it's a future tense word, which makes the flag to be a future tense verb. So they're not only dishonoring the fact that it's a fact, they're taking the fact and they're changing it into something it isn't, and then they're moving it off into the future, so there's no now-time jurisdiction to say, we did a now-time violation. That's why all the twos come in. The United States Constitution has a Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights says you have the right to travel, the right to write, the right to read, the right to propagate. You have all these freedoms. Why? In two, every single one of them starts with two, which means it's all in the future. We have no now-time rights. And the minute I said that, and I published that all over the place, the United States government goes ahead and they drop the World Trade Center and say, all your rights are gone, folks. You got to go through security, and everything is corporate. You want to walk into this building, you don't own it. You're going to be a trespassing individual. You need a passport. You know, Russell and I went to Europe. Russell mailed himself. He put a postage stamp and a flag on his chest and he mailed himself to Europe. Went down to the post office, sent his body registered mail, put a registered mail sticker on him, signed his name across it, and he mailed himself to Paris. First time in the history, since in 100 years, that somebody transported himself, a live body, between point A and point B of a foreign government and got away with it. And the reason he got away with it, and this is really weird, as the 747 landed in Paris, all of the immigration and custom officers went on strike. So they had 6 supervisors to handle 4,000 immigrants coming through the gates. We were backed up for a half a mile. I mean, this is really a... And they just opened the gates and they let everybody walk through it, including Russell. With his, they just said, hold up your passport as you walk through. And as Russell was with me, and the guy goes, wait a minute, where's his passport? I says, he's a postmaster and he's mailed himself to Paris. I'm a postmaster and I'm in charge of my cargo, and I've signed my name across his registered mail sticker. All right, you can go.
How did he get?
And that got back to the United States Postal Service and the State Department that Russell had mailed himself. Every judge in America was notified about this. It was quite the rout.
How did he get through from America to get on the plane?
Oh, then when we came back, we went down to the Vatican. We established our keymaster's position with the Vatican. Well, the head of the Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris is the great-great-grandson of Joan of Arc, who was a keymaster with the Vatican. What are the odds of that? So we're there, and we got around a DC-10, 300 passenger, and we're all getting ready to take off. And here's Russell with a ticket, and he's mailing himself back to the United States. Well, the central Bern, Switzerland, because we were just there and met with the United States Postal Inspector for the whole European continent, And we spent an hour and a half with him, so he vouched for Russell's knowledge as a postmaster. But then the immigration and customs officers would not allow Russell to board the plane. Said he didn't have a passport. Well, we had filled out the necessary paperwork to mail him back to the United States. And I was the postmaster transporting my cargo, who was a fellow postmaster. And this wasn't, the guy wasn't buying it. So he had to call up the supervisor at 2 o'clock in the morning to come down to the airport. And when he found out that we were both keymasters with the Vatican and he was a keymaster, we had a really nice conversation, and he walked us through as diplomats with diplomatic immunity and didn't require passports. Because of our status, they called Rome. The Vatican vouched, Cardinal Sedano vouched for us, so did the State Department in Washington, which was Postal Inspector Seuss, and Potter was the postmaster to vouch for us. So we had enough muscle from 4 different governments vouch for Russell and I that we got on the plane and flew back to Philadelphia.
So this is one of those, don't try this at home, boys.
These are, right, these are, these are, this was something that got through the cracks. Everything that Russell and I have done for 10 years has been the first time it's ever been done in history because it was done through syntax. And so they slammed the door on anybody else ever trying to do anything that we were doing, from getting a postmaster general position to being muster master at the Pentagon to keymaster with the Vatican to postmaster of the Interpol, Bern, Switzerland, the Universal Postal Union, and Quantum, where they were in fiction. I mean, we captured Zurich, the World Court, Interpol, the Vatican, Washington, D.C., the Pentagon. I mean, we went around and we knocked all these things down, one after another. They couldn't keep up with us. They were spending thousands and thousands of dollars trying to keep up with the airfares of us.
Captured Vatican? Can you elaborate?
Sure. When we wrote a syntax quantumized international bank treaty with the Vatican, it was the first time they ever saw syntax. All their bank treaties worldwide since 79 AD were written in adverb verb and had no standing. Now that they've got a syntax quantumized bank treaty, it automatically vacated their entire position globally. And there's been nothing but trouble ever since that. So we still maintain our keymasters' positions and our postmasters' positions with the Vatican, and we do correspondence.
Okay, well, talking about that later. I want to go back to the syntax. The word to, you said that's always in future tense?
Well, they will use it as an adverb in future tense.
So is there any time in Australia we use the word to in any, in future, past and present? And most of the time it's used in the present.
You only think it is. It's not. The rest of the sentence, all the different words that are here are going to articulate why the value of that word is what it is. Now, the person that wrote this, you saw that there was a pattern. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 3, 4. And those patterns of the Queen don't change. I can look at any document I want. Queen Elizabeth has written. It's either written in 1, 2 or 1, 3, 4 patterns.
Right. The reason I'm asking this, because we use the word to so much, and you said it is the most bastardized word in the English language, that means we're going to be offending our new knowledge of the syntax by being caught very easily using the word to.
No, to is not found in my book. You got 107 pages. The word to doesn't appear anywhere in my book.
Doesn't have to be there for us to use it.
The point is your Freudian conditioning to use this word is only a conditioning. Right. Because you've been doing it so much for so long, you're not qualified to do nothing. And that's exactly what happens when you use to. You create nothing.
Right, so teach us how not to use it.
Read the book. By the time you get done reading my book, you're going to see so many prepositional phrases and patterns and associations that your mind will automatically shift gears. Because when you read an adverb verb, you're going, this is wrong. I can do this. Every time you pick up a newspaper, the only thing you're going to be doing is syntaxing.
If you taught me how to do it, I'd be able to read your book.
If you read, okay, people always read to yourself, right? You don't speak out loud. When you read to yourself, only your eye and your brain are registering. You have 5 senses. When you read out loud, you're speaking. So the mechanical part of your brain has to generate your speaking capacity. You have to be able to see. You hear what you're saying. You're holding something in your hand, the mechanics of your eye moving back and forth. You've got all 5 of your senses working with you when you read out loud to yourself, because you hear what it says. 90% of all the things you learn in life are from hearing, what you hear on TV, on the radio, somebody else talking to you and teaching you things. That is your major connection to your brain, to your memory cells, is what you hear. So if you read my book out loud to yourself, all of a sudden, like, it's going to start registering it. You get into a court scenario, you're talking to a judge. You're in an oral conversation, he's talking to you in an oral conversation. But if you're reading and only the cells of reading are registering, your hearing part of your brain is uneducated to hear or to speak, to reproduce those sounds of what syntax sounds like. And so you're handicapping your own self. And besides, when you get in front of a judge, you're going to be nervous because you don't want to go to jail. That's always the threat and the intimidation scenario. But if you read and you read out loud to yourself, you've got all these different senses working together. So if one gets nervous, you've got your other backups which are going to kick in and protect you. And it will calm you down. You'll be able to carry on a conversation intelligent. Not intelligently. Because you always want to put that ly, which makes all words that end in ly, are adverbs. Even the word family, only. Those are 2 words that are used all the time, but they end in ly. It's the ly words that kill you. And usually ly words, when you end a sentence, you're talking and you're ending that sentence with a ly word adverb. And so therefore, you've got a dangling participle. It should be a verb, but you've got a dangling participle adverb.
Can you start a sentence with a pronoun?
No. Only with a preposition. A pronoun says nothing. Just like, what is your name?
But we start.
That's a pronoun. I'm calling you.
Sentences. Pronouns and adjectives.
You're trying to grab that fuzzy little world of adverb-verb fiction. You're brainwashed. That's why you're trying to make an argument against syntax because you're trying to use nothings. An adverb is a modifier, an adjective is a coloring modifier, a pronoun is a nothing. It means no, no, no. You don't have a contract for a pronoun. How can you make communications if you don't have a contract?
So what happens if you start the sentence with a pronoun like you and I and us and we?
They're not always pronouns. I saw. I can be, in this case, I saw, it's adverb verb. Or I am. I is an adverb making am a verb. Or I can be the pronoun and am is the adverb because it connects to it in front. Both of them are wrong.
So what you're saying is that if you use a pronoun or personal pronoun at the beginning, then it changes to an adverb if it's followed by a verb.
No. In other words, if you're saying pen is a pronoun, is an adverb. Mm-hmm. Is pen would be an adverb verb. Both ways is wrong. You don't have a fact. You don't have a sentence. You don't have a prepositional phrase. You don't have a verb of thinking. If you got a verb thinking, where's the fact that you're going to be thinking about? You got to have 13 words to make a legal sentence. That's the smallest sentence you can possibly write is 13 words. Anything less than that, you're just blowing smoke.
So can you give us a running description of how a pronoun becomes an adverb?
Like I said yesterday, if you ask me for a pen, I'll hold up a pen. If you ask me for a penny in Maori, I'm going to hold up a coin. But in Maori language, it means pen. Did you hear what I said, what I said, what I meant, what I said, what I meant, what I said? We got to have a communication. There's 5,000 languages out there. You're only thinking in one language, English. And English, E-N-G, is actually a D. In 1750, the English changed the D to a G because it was endless, end of contracts. Somebody finally figured that out. So they changed it to a G so people wouldn't look for the word end, which means no. England was the end of the world, of Europe. You fell off it. Well, ever since Columbus in 1500 or 1492, they know that there was something else out there, and then people started exploring the world.
All of the rules that you're talking about with syntax now and how words change and adjectives, are they all in the book, like from someone that's a beginner? Like
Styles, it's in the styles manuals of all 250 countries.
But where do we learn that if someone's just beginning to try and grasp an understanding of that, is your book?
My book explains it all, yes. My book explains it over and over and over again, to the point it becomes doublespeak. You can get on my internet site and look at it too.
Yeah, I had a look at the internet site, couldn't read it.
That's only because you haven't come to the seminar and been exposed to all the things, the conversation.
Fair enough.
So. We don't need paper. We need a washcloth or something, because paper doesn't do a good job. We need. See if the management's got a ragger like we had here yesterday. Or get some get some markers that don't. See, what you need is a dry marker. A dry marker just wipes off with an eraser, because these things just smear. Yeah, if you ever take and accidentally grab a permanent marker and you put it on a whiteboard, the only thing that'll take a permanent marker is a dry marker. You immediately use that to erase the permanent marker and it'll come off. It's the only, it's because of the chemical that they put inside of it. And these are a little bit better, yeah. That's a real coarse paper there. Yeah, that'll look better. Yeah, this stuff here works better because they're softer. That's a real coarse paper. There. All right, now this here is a personal injury lawyer's writing. Let me get my glasses. We're not going to use any names here because to protect the innocent. But this case has been going on for 3 years. The lawyer in this case is becoming frustrated because he can't get the insurance company to settle with him. Now, when you write a legal contract, there's a law that says you cannot sign a blank sheet of paper, and a paper must have 2 legal sentences on it. As you can see, there's only part of a sentence that was brought over from the backside of this one. So this is not a legal sentence, nor is the autographs legal because they're both initials. You have to actually autograph something, not simulate it. And then the claim section is put into a box because Federal Reserve notes or non-conclusive contract values are not legal. So therefore they box it, and anything in a box is an enclosed area and can't be considered. So therefore all of your IRS claims that they send you here in Australia are the same as in the United States, are all boxed, written in adverb, verb, double-spaced, and italicized. So they're using 4 conditions of fraud to remove it and create the illusion. We then take, how do you fight your case? How do you get a settlement from an insurance company? Well, this insurance issue here is the same as my mom and dad. They were involved in a car accident. They wanted to give my mom and dad $2,000 and they were senior citizens and they both had back injuries as a result of this car accident. This is an injury case also. It's almost parallel to all the experience I had in my dad's case. So, and my dad was, the insurance company sends out 350 questions for interrogatories that they want him to answer, giving him all his personal history of his life going back to when he graduated from high school and he's 72 years old. And he's going, this is ridiculous, and they want this before they're going to pay me. And I'm going, don't worry about it, Dad. I'll take care of it. So I went through and it says adverb verb, says nothing, has no condition. And I went through all 350 questions. It says this doesn't pertain to the car accident. Send it back to the insurance company, saying you can't read and write, your paperwork is all fraudulently conveyed, your questions are nonsense and have nothing to do with a car accident. Chuck it. And he did. So then the lawyer that they had would not take their phone call. So I called him up and I says, I've syntaxed the work that you've done for the insurance company. And by syntaxing the language on the page, you have, my parents paid you money, hired you because you have risk management insurance to guarantee that if there's any physical damage in the contracting of your conduct, that the insurance company will pay the damages, better known as malpractice. So I said to the lawyer, the language that you are using is fraudulently conveyed, and now you're talking about money. So this is bank fraud. And the insurance company's lawyers are also fraudulently conveying their language back to you. And they are submitting a paycheck to their insurance company while they are fraudulently conveying language to keep this thing floating in the air and never coming to a conclusion. Well, at the same time that they are fraudulently conveying language and sending in a paycheck, the paycheck is reducing the assets of the corporation, which is the insurance company, which is traded on the New York Stock Exchange, which means they've extorted money from a corporation which is now stealing money from its shareholders, and the Securities and Exchange Commission now has to come in and say, why are you paying employees to commit a criminal act under Title 18, Section 1001, and a Title 15, Chapter 2B, Section 78 FF, $25 million fine penalty and 30 years in prison while extorting money from a shareholder on his Securities and Exchange Commission? We only want $50,000. The penalty for fraudulently conveying language and extorting money from the Securities and Exchanges, $25 million. And I've got a signed confession here. Well, can we settle this now, quietly? And 48 hours later, we get a check in the mail for $2,500. And I'm going, yeah, right, okay. We need it. I says, Dad, Mom, I says, we need $385,000 for the aggravation and all the BS that these people have caused you. So we submitted a complaint of $385,000 to the insurance company. They immediately, all insurance companies worldwide must take and put 10% of the initial claim in an escrow account which they cannot touch. So that's $38,500. Plus they have to take care of all the car expenses to rebuild the car and all the hospital medical expenses, which came to about another $30-some thousand. But the compensation for personal injury was $38,500. I says, that is all you're going to get unless you want to spend 3 to 5 years in a court, get to a jury, and it'll be a crapshoot. You might win, but there's a good chance you might not. There's an 80-20 chance on that. I says, by filing this claim and then showing them that the Securities and Exchange Commission is going to do an investigation on the lawyers from the insurance company as well as the individual who filed the claim with their lawyers, where they acted together in a joint conspiracy to deny both the client and pay the insurance claim. And now we have a conspiracy, which is a 10-year prison sentence, to extort money, which is bank fraud and Securities and Exchange fraud. So now we got a whole stack, and everything on the back of my business card also applies. So all of these things are now set on the table, and we go and we meet with I call my mom and dad's lawyer up, and I says, all these things are going to happen, and I hang up. All these things are going to happen, and I hang up the phone. My dad says, now what? I says, just wait. I says, yeah, it'll probably take maybe 10, 15 minutes. I says, the phone's going to ring. Sure enough, 8 minutes goes by and the phone rings. Can you be in my office in 5 minutes? So we go in there, go over to the lawyer's office, about 6 blocks from my mom and dad's house. By the way, they lived in Tampa, Florida at the time. And we walk in there and shake hands with the man. Nice, warm handshake. And then I introduce myself as plenipotentiary judge, David Wynn Miller, and that I have your signed confession here for all these criminal acts. I had a whole list of them. I think there was about 22 of them that I read off to him. And how he had acted to create this language and work with the insurance company who created the language to violate the Securities and Exchange Commission's rules and regulations and constitute mail fraud. Then we got up and said, we want $385,000. And I went to shake his hand, and he couldn't move his fingers. There was no blood left in his arm. His hand was as cold as if he had just soaked it in ice water for the last 10 minutes, and he couldn't move his fingers to shake hands goodbye. He couldn't talk. He couldn't hold a pen in his hand either to even take notes. He was that scared. And again, the next morning, we got a check for $2,500. My dad says, what do I do? I said, tear it up. Tomorrow there'll be a check for $3,500. Wednesday there'll be a check for $4,500. Thursday there'll be a check for $5,500, and so on until we hit $38,500. And so every day for the next 30 days, there was $1,000 more a day. And when he hit $38,500, I said, Dad, take the check down to the bank and cash it. You're all done. You got paid. They're going to take care of your car, your hospital bills, and you got $38,500 in your pocket, and it's tax-free because it's personal injury. And that was it. We never heard from the insurance company again. If you know how to get through the gauntlet, any one of you got a personal injury case, and I got the technology to take this as forensic evidence, get paid in 30 days. And I can guarantee that, I don't care where you stand in the country. Because we told, we're going to contact the insurance company. I sent text AIG, it was $100 a share, dropped to $1.50. I sent text this insurance company's paperwork, and they're going to be out of business. And they already know what I did to AIG. So the minute I file a claim with these guys and tell them that I'm on board watching, they'll probably get this settled in the next 30 days without ever setting foot in a courtroom. And they'll get exactly what they want. When you get proficient at this information, and I talk to you on the phone, I'll say 265672. You know that if you go to page 26 in my book, you're going to get the definitions, the tricks and the traps. You go to 52, you're going to get an 18-page Title 42, and if you go to 72, you're going to know how to prosecute an attorney in cross-examination. Now, if I only got 2 or 3 seconds to give you information, or you're in court and you're at the witness stand and I'm not allowed to talk to you, and the judge has ordered me to sit there and keep my mouth shut, I can do this and do this. I just said 23. I says use page 23 for the tricks and the traps. You've already got it memorized, and you can go ahead and download on the judge because you just was something you got nervous and forgot about. That's how do you think basketball and baseball players talk in football? They're sitting there doing this here. You know, they're giving sign language to each other on the field. Soccer, hockey, doesn't matter what it is. They all talk in sign language because these are preempted documents, and all you have to do is be told what number to use, and it downloads 10,000 words of information. That's the unique thing about this technology. You can help each other once you read the book and you know where the pages. Pay attention to the pages, because if you work out a code with somebody else and you need a partner in court, he can talk to you through sign language. You know, he just sit there and do this, do this. You know, because when a judge talks to the DA in court, and you won't even see this happening, and Stephen showed you this, a little bit of this yesterday, when we're cross-examining, the judge is doing this here, meaning talking to the DA, saying, you open your mouth, you ain't never going to have another case in here. Or the DA is asking for prison time in a case, And the judge is sitting there doing this here, which means I want 4 years in prison. The DA is sitting there going, no, I want 5 years in prison or 10 years in prison. And the judge says, no, I'm only going to give him 3. And the other guy, the other prosecuting attorney, is there and he's going, well, how about just 2? You know, so they're having a conversation like this, using their fingers on their face. And they got this all rehearsed in the back room as they're going to negotiate in court. And they'll be talking one thing, but they're actually using fingers to articulate how many months or how many years this person is going to go to jail. So pay attention to the sign languages that are taking place in court, because if you know how it's being done, and I was in the gallery and these guys were all doing the sign language, and I says, excuse me, court reporter, these guys are talking in sign language and you're not getting the whole story here. And she got up and walked out of the courtroom. The case was called because they didn't have a court reporter. And they got caught.
With that sentence, there still are some serious issues I have with it. That's not in the first tense, not in the first person. It starts off with the third person, and it doesn't specify that you were the runner, that I witnessed you running.
Yeah, your witnessing claim is here.
Right, but it doesn't specify who the runner is.
Okay, then we just add you as Sam's witnessing claim. Right. How about that?
Can we change the first Sam to my, for my knowledge, or for my personal knowledge?
Yeah, because you're not, you're the person that's watching a runner. See, the runner is irrelevant. He doesn't require the knowledge. He isn't part of the sentence. It's your knowledge. You're the witness.
So can I use the word the personal pronoun instead of the name?
Use what?
The personal pronoun, my.
No.
My or mine.
No, we don't use my, we don't use your, we don't use yourself, we don't use I or me. We don't use any of those because they're not first person specific. You have to have a specific name when you talk in a lawsuit. You have to specifically say that you are the claimant. Now, this is another thing I didn't tell you. When you write a lawsuit, at the beginning, the first thing says, David Wynn Miller, claimant. My name will be used as the claimant throughout the next 150 sentences on the page. At no other time will my name be used as a first person specific, because claimant is first person specific. Now, when I'm in a case with 3 other people as a witness, so we have 3 claimants. Now, in every sentence that ends where it's witnessing or making a claim against the other parties doing the damage, it says by the claimants, because we are acting as a corporation suing this one individual, and the 3 of us witnessing 2 or more, it's going to be claimants. And that way I don't have to keep writing everybody's name. It simplifies the way documents are written in law. This is standard procedure. Whether it be fiction or in my technology, in fact, that terminology and that way of writing is standardized worldwide.
So the personal names are interchangeable with claimant in whatever capacity it's on the documents, but never with a personal pronoun.
Right. You can't use a pronoun because you immediately drop it. You didn't take jurisdiction for the pronoun.
Right. Then on the end of the sentence, if you can't use a personal pronoun, what can you use to identify the person who was running?
Well, if you have his name, you're just simply witnessing a runner, that's all.
Right. No, I'm making a witness that I can identify the runner, not just witnessing a runner.
You want to identify your son as being the runner? Then put his personal name in here. And you can go here for Sam's knowledge and then put a specific name and drop all this, take out one runner and just put a specific name, is with a witnessing claim of the one runner. Who's the one runner? Well, instead of one runner, it would be your son's name as the runner.
Right. But my letter or claim is against you. So would I put your name in?
You mean I'm the runner?
Against, but making a statement of...
Yes,
as
if
a
you want to
witness.
state, because when you're going to swear out an affidavit that you witnessed somebody, you can't use generics. You have to be specific that I saw this person shoot this person, he used his full name at this time and place and location. And now everything is time sensitive in law. Everything is location sensitive because of jurisdiction in law, or in the law.
Location sensitive.
Location, right, jurisdiction comes under. So a sentence is not only, it's some location you have to account for the time that the incident took place. You have to account for the location because of jurisdiction. You have to account for the specific individuals who are, and give as much specific information, the name, address, social security number, this has to appear someplace in the document. And any witnesses that will corroborate your position in another sentence, because a document is a bonded document. So all these points of information go together as a complete thought.
If I were to write a document in the first person referring to myself as I did this, I saw that, I did the other thing.
No, you would be a claimant.
And then I gave it to the judge, and the judge were to read it.
Out loud,
When he
the
was
judge would be the
reading,
one being the
he'd
I.
be saying I, and the judge would be saying I didn't do that.
Right.
Along the way, which is the reason why we need to be specific.
That's
So-
why you're a claimant. You see, gold miners didn't file mortgages, they didn't file promises, they filed claims, because claim and gold go together. That's why we use the word claimant. It's the strongest position of who you are. You're not a defendant, that's no contract. You're not a petitioner, because you're not there yet. A petitioner is asking permission in the future, but is not a claimant because he has knowledge firsthand. You're not a respondent, which means no spoken contract. Now you're mute before the court. You don't want to be a respondent or a defendant. You are either vassallee, which is a servant employee of this document because your name's on it. You are better known as the United States. Two or more people coming together on a contract is the United States. The United States is defined as two or more people. You can either be the claimant or a vassallee. V-A-S-S-A-L-E-E. The word vassallee I copyrighted in 1999. That word never existed. Look up EE in any dictionary, it says employee. It's a fact, it's a word. EE is a fact. You can use it in a Scrabble game. And that vassal is a servant. A vessel is V-E-S-S-A-E-L, and vassal is V-A-S-S-A-L. And vassal is a servant employee of the paper. So if your name's on here, it's been stamped, you're under postal contract for commerce, they can't get out of it. Yes?
Thank you, David. You mentioned page 23. Is this the book?
Yes.
23 is not in here. Am I missing something, or?
Oh, it isn't? Well, just misnumbered, that's all. I write the numbers in by hand.
Okay. It goes from 22 to 24.
Did you lose one?
Oh, I get it. Thank you.
When I did those, because we made changes in them constantly, where I would take something out of content and say, well, this document isn't big enough, and I'll add 2 pages. I'll have 23A, 23B, because I didn't have time to rewrite all the numbers on all the pages from the master book that I have. Otherwise, it's an issue. The master program, in other words, in my computer, was destroyed when my computer was burned up in the fire. And so the documents that I have that were completed have not been hand retyped all back into the computer. So when we were going to change only 1 page between printings of one book and another book, I didn't have time to go out and hand type the entire 107 pages. That's 9-point print. That's about 3 months of work for me. I'm not a speed typer. I'm still one finger here. Yeah. Oh, time? They want to take your 10:30, 11 o'clock break?
I noticed your book was all in uppercase, shout. Any
Shout,
particular
right.
reason for
A
that?
shout is a command. You must be obeyed. You see, the government said, this all came about in the Moser case with the Secretary of State of the state of Wisconsin. No, excuse me, the Attorney General of Wisconsin. I sued the Attorney General of Wisconsin for fraud in a lawsuit back in 1996. And this was in front of Judge Moser, the 96-year-old judge. And he went ahead and said, Mr. Miller, why did you write all of your 12-page document in uppercase? And he says, I noticed the E is a little higher too. I says, well, I had a 1952 Bell typewriter. He says, you know, he says, that's the same one I used when I went to law school. He says, that damn E always, they had a kicked up. He says, that was the old ribbon, you know, the old ribbon typewriters you see in the black and white movies. Well, that's what I wrote my very first lawsuit on. And he kind of chuckled with that, and he says, how come you didn't write it in lowercase? I says, well, the lowercase key is busted on there. He says, well, how come your name's in upper and lowercase? I says, because I had to use a needle nose pliers to pull the key up and then tap it with a screwdriver to write my name in upper and lowercase to make it work, and to do a whole document like that would be kind of redundant. This was when I was real poor and starting out, you know. So he says, well, I got to give you credit. He says, how long did it take you to type this? I says, 4 months. He says, just with one key at a time and making sure that the typewriter was working right and replacing ribbons. He says it was quite a mess. He says, yeah, I see all the smudges on here. So then he turns to McDermott. Now, McDermott was the Attorney General at the time of Wisconsin. He says, how come you wrote all your lawsuits back to Mr. Miller in uppercase? He says, well, I didn't know what he was doing, so I copied him. He says, you're the Attorney General. You're supposed to know syntax. The Attorney General says, what's syntax? Well, after the judge got on laughing, he says, all right, he says, it means shout. And that's when he educated me on the word shout and what I was doing. He says, it's a command that must be obeyed. He says, because you wrote in syntax, a syntax command has jurisdiction over an adverb verb, which doesn't say anything in shout. It's just shouting nothing. And I won that case because I wrote it in shout and I wrote it in correct syntax. And that's why my book has always been in uppercase shout, and so is my website. Now, even when I type on the computer, I send messages back and forth on my emails, I put it in uppercase, and a lot of my students come back and, what are you shouting at me for? Some people know about it, but it's a word that most people don't know about. That's it. You guys satisfied with this? And I'll put another sentence up. Take your break, and while you're taking your break, I'll do the writing. Yeah.
David, can you please talk about, you mentioned about your near-death or death experience.
No, I wasn't near death. I was legally dead by all medical reasons for 35 minutes.
Can you talk about that? And can you also talk about around your purpose, around what you're here to sort of, the big picture around what you're to communicate and what the end game is? And also, some people make comments about walk-in energies and conduiting and channeling information, data, where that's coming from for you.
Well, okay. How many of you remember the old TV series? I don't know if they broadcast this down here. I Dream of Jeannie by Barbara Eden. Some of you saw that, okay? Well, I was 18 years old one day, and I was watching that on TV, and Jeannie's father come in. He was the big Zen and took away Jeannie's powers and gave them back to her at the end of the show. And after the show was over, I said to myself, of course, the fantasy of genies and having all the power in the world. What is power? The word power is meek, M-E-E-K. The Bibles all around the world tell you that the meek shall inherit the earth. A meek person has absolute power over life and death. And he uses it to teach people. He's a teacher. He does not use his power to hurt anybody.
That's what the word doctor means, isn't it, teacher?
Doctor?
The word doctor, I think it means teacher.
I don't know. I haven't looked that one up or researched it. So I looked up the word meek. I found out what the definition of it was. And then I was 18 years old, and I stood in front of the mirror, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I says, if you were given absolute power, the knowledge over all things, what would you do with it? And I says, well, I wouldn't hurt anybody with it because it's not part of my personality. And I like to teach people, so I says I'd become a teacher. And I said to myself out loud, would you make a promise to yourself that if you were given absolute power that you would become responsible as a teacher? And you would never hurt anybody with it. And I says, yeah, I would do that. So I'm having a two-way conversation with me and the guy in the mirror. Don't laugh. I was a marriage counselor for 12 years. I know how to talk, how to communicate with people, and how to people communicate with other people. So I'm going to share this with you. So I said, yeah, I can do that. And I made a promise to myself that I was ever given the absolute power that I would become the teacher. And I would be a friend and expand upon that and dedicate my life to it. Well, a few years later, a couple days after that, I got beat up in the 1968 riots in Milwaukee, and I was held down by 4 boys while the 5th one proceeded to kick my right kidney like you tee a football. And it killed my right kidney, and they damaged my left one. So I got kicked 4 times in the left side and 7 times in the right side. So I had a dead kidney in me for 7 years. It was excruciating pain on a day-to-day basis because I had a sack as big as my fist of dead black material in my side. And even at that, I had to work every day doing physical labor with the pain, and I got used to it. So my body created a super immune system because of the level of poison I had to deal with. Then when I was on December 3rd, 1975, I went into surgery to do an exploratory. The doctor, Pollard, who was the #1 kidney specialist, I don't think he's alive today, was supposed to do the surgery. He was out on the golf course. All the doctors came into the operating room with masks on. And I had a South Korean doctor who was only there as an apprentice, who had never cut anybody in their life, started to slice into me. Took out 3 ribs, took out my dead kidney, took my adrenal gland off the right side as well. Then he thought he was supposed to take both kidneys out. So because he didn't want to cut the other side open because I was already laid in half from my navel to my spine, he went ahead and he went through my chest cavity, pulling everything apart, and cut my left. He couldn't get at the left kidney completely, so he cut the left kidney in half, and he removed the left kidney top half. There's 5 chambers. He took the 2 out with the adrenal gland. As soon as he removed my adrenal gland, I went into anesthesia shock, and I was flatlined because anesthesia is a poison. I was legally dead, and he knew they screwed up. And of course, they told my parents and my brothers and sisters that I had died, and I was in the morgue for 35 minutes, cut in half, laying on a gurney. And the head nurse was down there, and she's the one that told me the story after the fact. She says, your heart started beating. And the coroner just said, oh, just let it, it's just gas from the body decomposing. And she went and she pulled my eye open with a flashlight, and she says, no, his eye's responding, his brain's alive, we got to sew him back up. So they called the Code Blue, rushed me back upstairs, took them 11.5 hours to put me back together. After, they couldn't figure out why I was alive without adrenaline. And when they did the blood work, my endorphin level was 60 times higher than a normal person, which is an amino acid with no adrenaline in my system. I had been completely altered for some reason. Now, the adrenaline that I have, the endorphin that I have is an amino acid, which is the food for the brain. After I found out over the years of researching why I was still alive, and the hospital continued to maintain my blood type every month, take blood samples to see why I was still walking around, because you can't live without adrenaline. And having half of 1 kidney, I didn't require any dialysis either. And I was in perfect health. And I also had a 25 heartbeat. Anything below 40, you'd be in a coma. And I'm walking around with 25. And I did this for 35 years with 25, till I electrocuted myself in my garage and it went up to 60. Kid you not. I forgot to unplug the extension cord when I put the end of it together, and I grabbed it with one hand, the socket and the screwdriver in the other, and I took 110 across the chest and reprogrammed my heart from 25 beats a minute to 60 beats a minute. Now it's back to like 30 beats a minute right now, 30, 35. About at 3 years I had a lot of energy. But the endorphin levels, with me staying awake and maintaining an A average in school, working 2 full-time jobs at the same time, not sleeping, my nephew comes to me. He's having trouble staying awake. He's going to computer school, and he says, Uncle David, he says, how do you do it? How do you run 24 hours a day without sleep, go to college, and do all these things that you do, studying, working, He says, what's your secret? And I says, well, it's the endorphins. I says, the endorphins that I have are brain food. Now what they've done is they have accelerated my IQ from 140 to over 200 because it made neurons. Remember the movie Phenomena with John Travolta, where he had a brain cancer which was fibristic and connected brain cells? Well, that's what happens with you increase your amino acid in the brain. You take a 400% dosage of the amino acid, which is the brain food, and it causes your neurons, instead of having 6 contacts per nerves, I got like 20. So the exponential contacts of all the nerves have given me a brain that's like a supercomputer. And then it grew both of my brains together. So I only have one brain. I don't have 2 hemispheres, I have one. They did this in a CAT scan to prove this because of all connections. So I'll do this for you as soon as we get the board off of here. I write with both hands frontwards, backwards, and in both directions at the same time, legibly. I can write left-handed as easy as I write right-handed. Frontwards, though, I don't have to do this like Obama does. So I can, my left side can see my right side, and my right side can see my left side. And while I read left to right in subject matter, I read backwards at 400 words a second in math codes. It's kind of something that only I do. I can't teach it to anybody. It's just something I do. And it allows me to absorb huge amounts of information. People bring me lawsuits. I did one last night for an hour. I had 100, I think it was about 100 pages, 120 pages to read in an hour, and then come up with all the solutions of how to solve the problem with all the laws, rules, and regulations. And to me, it's just a cakewalk to absorb that much information and process it. Same thing it is to break down sentences and show you what the secret codes mean. And what we're going to do here, well, I'm not done with this. The amino acid, everyone in here has amino acids that feed your brain. Now you have, I believe it's 14 or 18 different blood types and groups, and there's 8 amino acids in your body. So your chances are 1 in 64 that you're going to hit the right one. If you can isolate the amino acid based on your blood type to feed your brain, you can go to one of these nutrient stores like GNC. That's what we have up in the United States called GNC. It's a nutrient store. And you can isolate your amino acid for your brain and take a 400% dosage every day. You can increase your IQ every day. Now, when I was in Denver, I had a man who was involved in an automobile accident, and he had part of his brain removed, and he was mentally retarded when he came to the seminar, could barely speak. And he found his amino acid, and he went on a 400% a day dose, and he also used a frequency zapper to accelerate cell regeneration. And he came back to a seminar 12 weeks later. He had a full-time job, and his IQ went up 60 points. He went from mentally retarded to being a normal person, carrying on a normal conversation with anybody, and having a full-time job, and he got his life back. And he stood up and did a testimony for all the people in the audience as to where the people met him the week when I was there the first time, and they came back 3 months later, and the same people came to the seminar. And now they got to see this man who had recovered from being mentally retarded to being a normal person again, because he was taking the amino acids to rebuild his brain. So anybody can do it. You just got to figure out what it is. Now you would have to go to a doctor, have your blood analyzed, isolate the amino acids that are in your blood, and then find the one that's specifically generated for your brain, and you got to get a doctor to cooperate with you. And usually anesthesiologists are the ones that specialize in the blood chemistry, because they have to use anesthesia with the blood, and they got to cook this formula up together. So they would be the people to go to. Your country might not allow this. And you know what the most dangerous person in the world is? An educated person. Look at what I'm doing with education and the way I've flipped planet Earth over, having syntax. So I was given the gift of, if you ask a judge what does syntax mean, he says it is the most powerful thing on planet Earth. He who controls syntax controls the world. Because this technology disqualifies everything that's ever been written, and the most expensive, the highest paying job around is brain surgery, followed by contract writers. If you can write contracts in syntax, like I'm writing constitutions, I can sit down and it took me 3 months to write the United Nations Constitution, Australia's, New Zealand, and Hawaii's constitutions. And what I do is I take the existing constitutions, I remove all the things that are future, all the things that are past, all the things that are negative. Get a book of synonyms, look up every single word, find the now time definition, organize the words in the correct sentence structure, communication syntax, and then put the missing words in to complete the sentence. And it's all done algebraically. Once the algebra is certified frontwards and backwards, and the sentence can't be obstructed, it's then put into the Constitution, and there's 69 sentences in the Constitution. It is a foundation by which you can study from to improve. And I think as a group of 50, you were to read the Constitution as a group and try to add more things to it, you could make it better. But in New Zealand, as well as the Aborigines here in Australia, the question was, well, somebody's got to do something. Somebody's got to do something. The American Indians, somebody's got to do something. That's all I hear is, somebody's got to do something. The Canadian Indians, the Eskimos, every place I go in the world, somebody's got to do something. I'm going, well, okay, I'm going to do it. And I went ahead and I wrote all these constitutions. I wrote these lawsuits. I wrote all these programs. I put everything together. I says, I don't need your permission to do it. You prove it's wrong or make it better than it is. And there's your motivation. What is meek? Meek means I have the power to control the thinking capacity of 6 million people, to take this planet screaming and hollering into the future. I want a world where my kids can grow up, that they don't have to play, what is the answer to 2? Or what is your name? Where word games can't be an issue. That everything is as black and white as a math problem because nobody ever went to war over a math problem. So I broke the code and I wrote the language in a math problem that no one can argue with. It removes anger. Some of you people have been like, I don't know, how many seminars have you been to now, Steve? 12? Besides the ones you do? And even the ones that he does when I'm not there. There's a philosophy of this teaching program because it's a math procedure. Your brain is looking at things mathematically. It's not looking at it from an emotional standpoint. Even me talking about religion yesterday. Who is God? I didn't see anybody in here get upset because I watched your faces and you all smiled. You said, that was how I learned religion from 1,000 different sources. And it was so unique to me that nobody else can tell me who my God is. And it's the same thing with this technology. Whether he teaches it or I teaches it, the audience are at peace with it because it's a math procedure. It doesn't irritate the brain of, this man lied to me or told me something that wasn't true. And after 940 seminars in front of tens of thousands of people, and nobody gets upset, we must be doing something right. And we don't get any negative feedback. And I want to make another statement about the scam site on the internet. All the people that are involved in the scam site were criminals, committed criminal acts, and went to jail for criminal acts. They tried to use truth to get out of criminal acts. Didn't work. So they went ahead and they put their thing up there saying, truth doesn't work, to save me from me doing something bad. And this girl called Cole, claims to be my wife. Worked at an employment agency. She downloaded my credit report, got my social security number, and then had 4 MasterCards issued as my wife because she had all the classified information under identity theft. She did it to 12 other men as well. She then went on a shopping spree for $100,000. She took $4,000 off of my card alone. Yeah, and I prosecuted her and put her in prison, Utah State Prison, for 5 years. And she worked for an attorney when all this was going on. He bought the Las Vegas Times newspaper to slander me. And she used to be an employee at that newspaper. And she followed this program because she got arrested several times and put in jail for wrongdoing. And I had her cases dismissed because I was doing seminars in Las Vegas, roughly 14 different seminars, and she came to follow the program. And because she felt that she was writing all these good articles, she was had a, what's the word I want on here? She looked at me as being her savior because I could always make her lawsuits go away. And she wrote good articles in the newspaper because all the lawsuits I won in court in Las Vegas as well. And then when lawyers were being embarrassed and judges were being embarrassed, the Lawyers Association bought the newspaper and then slandered the truthful